Earlier this week, I posted a video regarding the situation around a $48,000 value dark ritual. With only 4 copies left in the world, a Secret Lair Showdown had 1 copy of it as a prize for the winner of a 5-round single elimination tournament. Now, Julia Jacobovits was participating in that tournament, and he left an account of a situation where he was 3-0 in the tournament, and due to events outside of his control, was ultimately provided a match loss by the judges at that tournament, and ultimately taken out of contention for a life-changing amount of money. Now, obviously, Julian could have lost in the semis, he could have lost in the finals, but he will never get the chance to play for that $48,000. And in a situation where first place gets $50,000 and second place gets almost nothing, he kind of took the MTG world by storm. He left his account, and I'll link all that down below, including my previous video, but the situation kind of blew up bigger than what is my forehead after this haircut at this point. Now, I think it largely would have just disappeared. I think to the annals of time, Magic Twitter and Magic itself probably would have just referenced it every so often, but we would have moved past it. I think a lot of negative sentiment around judges and the judging program has been brought about this, and I do want to say straight off the bat that I'm not advocating for any negative behavior towards judges. I think there are bad eggs in every single, kind of group of folks, and I'm not even saying that in this situation necessarily that there were bad people involved. Maybe bad decisions were made, but that's going to be left to you to make your own decision as we kind of go through the evidence that we got literally just this morning and yesterday from an update from the organization themselves. The tournament organizer and the organizing body posted their statement, and as well as Meg provided a response as the L3 judge that was part of that decision making and their account of the story. So we're going to get kind of both sides of the coin here, and we're going to ultimately be able to see if we can make a decision to see who was right. Because I think when it comes to any story, there's 3 angles. There's person 1, there's person 2, and then there's the truth. I think that can be objectively said. There's always details that are either left out or other details that are more focused on than others. So we never really know unless we're objectively there, bird's eye view, we can hear everything. So let's walk through all of the evidence that we have laid out here to see if someone made a bad call or if this is just a big misunderstanding. As I was mentioning, this is the tweet that Julian posted. Again, please watch my previous video for it. Julian's tweet and the kind of situation from there is all going to be linked down below, as well as these kind of other pieces that we're going to look through. So Pastimes, organizing body, released a statement regarding the situation at GenCon, and I think we're going to talk about later about why generally things like this don't happen, but because of the situation where the pricing was so high, there's an idea of not being able to acknowledge the secondary market value of this card and that the pricing was just this card, but that's a deeper discussion for later. Let's go into this statement first and the account afterwards. So GenCon 2024 was an incredible event with amazing players. Unique tournaments and special guests are as part of the fun. There was an incident, however, in the Secret Lair Showdown Championship, which has raised some comments online, and we feel is necessary to provide some additional information, especially due to the kind of fervor around it and the harassment of folks that have happened, which is not great. Ultimately, we are playing a card game, but now with the idea that there's a life-changing amount of money on the line, people do get a little pissy about it. The details shared online by one of the players do not match with the tournament officials' observations, nor do they accurately describe what occurred or why the penalty was given. The player in question was given a match loss per unsporting conduct, bribery or waging. Due to the IPG 4.4 rules, multiple judges and staff members were involved in the decision, and we completely support the head judge's final ruling and the penalty given. Our team works hard to keep the play fun and fair for everyone, and we do our best to ensure all players operate according to the same rules, which are available at that link. We realize that decisions often incite passionate responses. We're fans after all, and we never like to see anyone leaving an event frustrated or upset. However, even when emotions are high, there are ways to provide feedback or to escalate issues that focus on events, the rules, or the overall experience. I think this is true too. I think many of us on the internet, especially on Twitter, lack the decorum to actually have good back and forth conversation, have nuanced conversations, and actually provide feedback in a meaningful way. Most of these times, these people that do that are probably people that have never had to work in any type of real work life situation. They've never had to interact with real people. You don't just go around starting fights with people, or you don't just call people names unnecessarily, right? I do fall prey to that, I will admit that, but You don't just do it actively, right? And in this instance, an online report that was called out a staff member by name, leading to not only harassment of the named person, but of another judge who wasn't even at the event. Obviously, this is not acceptable behavior, and Pastime strongly stands by our staff and against online harassment. While we continue to support our staff, we also will be reaching out to the player involved to discuss this further. In the meantime, we look forward to a great, fun, and fair events in the future. So, bottom half of the statement. Great. I agree. We should not be harassing people. That is completely inappropriate at the end of the day, right? Because these are decisions made by people. People are human. They're allowed to make mistakes. But I think the pissiness is when it comes to the fact that it is a life-changing amount of money. That does not mean that you should go harassing people, but that's why people are harassing them. Ultimately, I don't like this statement. As a step one, we're going to go into another statement because I don't like this statement because it doesn't do anything. This is a nothing burger of a statement. This doesn't mean anything because it does not. It just says Julian is lying, or it says Julian isn't telling the whole truth without providing any evidence. There's no evidence or anything. Think back to everything I just read and reread the statement. Nothing is being said to provide evidence to the situation. All they said was the player in question was given a match loss due to unsporting conduct, and the details that were shared do not accurately describe what was occurred. Okay, so talk about what was occurred. And I guess in this situation, due to maybe legal ramifications, they can't necessarily outline that. But this also led to another level of frustration from a lot of folks yesterday when this was released. Like, I wholeheartedly understand why. Definitely a very frustrating statement to make, although albeit probably an unnecessary one. But this type of stuff kind of led to situations like this. And this was earlier, as you can kind of tell by the dates. That was done on August 7th yesterday. This was on August 5th. Dominic here says the competitive players who are really bad but think they are good by queuing for a couple RCs are holding us back from accepting the judge program is effed and needs a massive overhaul. Judges are against us and it's becoming more and more obvious with each event. Okay, so remember how I said we shouldn't be name calling people? Come on. I can participate in some internet vitriol. This guy's a prick. This guy's a prick. Okay, so it's hard for the average person to not use the example of one person to not have that image of a group or the body itself, because it usually tends to be the negative that you see more. It's kind of that idea where when you see reviews, a lot of the times when you see like reviews on a website, it tends to be negative reviews or folks that had a subpar or bad experience. Not a lot of it, psychologically speaking, there are studies about this. People don't leave reviews about good situations. So this is why when we see bad eggs in the judging organization, this is when we get situations or stories about them. We don't always get the positive judge experiences or the positive situations where the judges were able to handle a situation very well, which I think is very unfortunate. This is someone who is definitely psychologically affected by us. Judges are against us is stupid. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Judges are here to uphold the competitive integrity of the game. Robert's response here is perfectly what I'm looking for. I don't see giving up your play opportunity to go judge your locals, Shathid. By the way, shout out to anyone that gets that reference, the Shathid reference. But let me know in the comment section down below. But Robert's out here with the heat. But I agree. You know, as someone who's probably not that, Dominic, who's probably not a judge, coming out and saying judges are against us, because if they were a judge, they would be saying I am against you as a Magic player. They're probably not a judge. They don't understand the situation. Or what happened to get there. I think the average judge is a good person, has good intention. Well, I should say they have good intentions for the game of Magic the Gathering. I shouldn't comment on people's lives. People are crazy, Lord knows. But I think the average judge has good intentions for the game of Magic the Gathering because they want to uphold competitive integrity. I think in this situation, there might be some bad decisions made, especially when it came to personal, like, how I personally feel. I do want to objectively say, judges have good intentions. They're key to the competitive integrity of the game. But then Meg provided a response. This is my report covering the Secret Lair Showdown qualifiers and championships held at GenCon 2024. Traditionally, staff do not discuss ongoing investigations. We're going to talk about why. Another account kind of talked about why. However, this event is unique and exceptional, warranting a deviation. This is an interesting one. Strap in, folks. GenCon 2024 Secret Lair Showdown Tournament Report by Meg Bomb. This is a tournament report covering the bribery and collusion incident and Secret Lair Showdown qualifiers in Secret Lair held at GenCon 2024. The staff and players involved have been anonymized to protect privacy and facilitate the ongoing investigation. As traditional boundary, judges and staff do not publicly discuss ongoing investigations. This is probably due to legal ramifications, as we're going to see in a second. Investigations do not always end when the tournament itself does. Disqualifications, for example, still need to have determination made by wizards or whether or not to further action is required in a particular situation beyond expulsion from the event. This is done to protect the players involved as well as the integrity in the investigation. This event's high profile and stakes have made the situation unique and exceptional, warranting a deviation from this unofficial policy. The Secret Lair Showdown, hereby known as the SLS Championship, was held on Sunday of GenCon and was of 2024 and was fed by 4 qualifying events held on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Starting before the last round of the tournament, Thursday SLS qualifier, the head judge of the event received a report from a player that they had overheard 2 other players discussing possible bribery and collusion in the last round of the event. First of all, objectively, who is this op? Who is this op? What are you? Why are you snitching? Why? Why are you snitching? Okay, whatever. You know, I'm not even going to go down that route. I'm not going to go down that route. I was brought the same concern at the stage. The head judge initiated an investigation. The specifics of the accusations are paraphrased below. A player in the final round asked to scoop their opponent in the championship for a cut of their prizes. They intend to do this as many times as possible with their friends to get the highest likelihood of someone in the group making the top 8 and winning the Dark Ritual. So essentially, you know, they're in the final round of the qualifier into the SLS that paid out to the $48,000 prize pool. I shouldn't say prize pool. $48,000 value Dark Ritual, but there wasn't a market value necessarily for this. $48,000 was what someone paid for this because it was so unique, because there was only 4 copies of the Dark Ritual out there right now, as far as I'm aware. So this is a very unique situation. They cannot kind of acknowledge the fact that the prize was worth that much. They can only acknowledge the fact that the prizing was this card. It's kind of that whole idea with how wizards cannot acknowledge the secondary market. And so in this situation, the player is trying to scoop to their opponent and be like, oh, if I scoop to you right now, will you give me 20% of your final earnings? So let's say the opponent got a card that wasn't the Dark Ritual. Second place, I believe the card was worth about like $1,500 to $2,000. So if they sold that for $2,000, you know, whatever, you know, let's say they conceded for 50%, the other person would get $1,000. So it's kind of that kind of thing, and they would maybe participate in multiple of these qualifiers until they actually get into the qualifier, and maybe just concede, and just kind of up their EV that way. The investigation continued to the final round, ultimately resulting in no penalties being applied. I had rumors and accusations, but no screenshots, confessions, or hard evidence to sufficiently support that this had happened as described. Why are you snitching? In the Friday SLS qualifier, I asked the staff to continue watching for this behavior in the event. So the judges already had an idea that, especially with such a high stakes tournament, collusion was happening. There's a group of folks, collusion may not be the word, but there is what the Magic rules would consider to be bribery and wagering and illegal activity as per the rules in a game of Magic the Gathering. So they had kind of knowledge of this. In the Friday SLS qualifier, I asked the staff to continue watching for this behavior in the event. After the conclusion of the final round, I received reports of this type of behavior in the tournament again. However, this discussion occurred outside of the physical event. We continue... Who is the op here? We continue to investigate, but could not definitively attribute this to a single player or group of players. This type of collusion is challenging to investigate compared to investigating situations inside the event itself. Qualifiers on Saturday had no specific reports of collusion mentioned the previous 2 days. Sunday in the SLS championship, the reports of both the sale of equity. So this is kind of referring to the fact that, hey, I would like 20% of your winnings. You get the 80. So you're kind of staking equity in players within the event, and more mention of the deal of equity bought with the scoop in the championship toward the end of the Sunday event. So this specifically is not allowed. Like, you can't offer your opponent, like, you'll probably hear this at your locals as well and other tournaments that you might go to. You can't offer your opponent anything for them to scoop. You may offer to split prize rewards, like, hey, did you want to split the final rewards? But you can't be like, yo, I'll concede to you to give you this, right? But even the splitting is kind of a gray area too. Where I think splitting can benefit both players is in maybe a situation like an RC where someone is trying to get an invite, where you could say, hey, just to like remove the stress of the situation, did you want to split? Did you want to split the events? And if you work it out mutually, again, that's still like a gray area too, but I think splitting like that could be fine because one player may just want the store credit and the other player might just want the invite. Maybe a situation like that can be mutually beneficial, but again, it's probably still considered illegal. So don't come to me with like, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not trying to say like that's what they should do. No prize I instructed the head toward the Sunday's event. Sorry, we approached the top 8 of the matches. I instructed the head judge to not allow any discussions about splitting or prizes. No prize redistributions would be approved by the tournament organizer, me, nor was the Dark Ritual a splittable prize. So again, they can't really acknowledge that there's any monetary value in terms of splitting. You can't split a physical card. You can't take a pair of scissors and split it. Okay, so there's no, because of that, there's no splitting or redistribution of prizes. And regardless, it would go to the player in the first place of this event. I also reiterated that the first place prize for this event is not money nor the equivalent value of the card. It is a card. Again, they cannot acknowledge the secondary market. If the event winner would like to sell their prize after the event, that is their business. Any discussion of monetary value in exchange for a match result or in a split will be inappropriate. Right? I received reports that, again, there's discussion about scooping people involved in this collusion into the top 8 to increase the likelihood of them winning. This time it was overheard by a judge and immediately brought to me. Unfortunately, while this judge saw what player looked like, they did not manage to catch the player's name, nor which of the players they knew had been scooped in the top 8, the equity split. While I was investigating the situation, I asked the head judge of the event to make it clear to the players that they were not to speak to the spectators at this time. I worked behind the stage and sent out to other staff members to investigate these claims and verify identities. As I did this, another situation was brought to my attention from the top 8. The head judge at the event and the floor judge who took the initial call informed me a player placed a wager on the top 8 with the spectator. It spoken with the player and determined they did not understand what they had done was considered wagering. The judges believed a match loss was appropriate and no cheating had occurred in this incident. I told them to apply the penalty if the player would like to speak to the tournament organizer or come to the stage. A pastime representative would speak to them. Okay, so this is where the kind of story of the situation splits off, right? So the head judge at the event, floor judge, informed the player they had placed a wager in the top 8 with a spectator. Now, Julian says that in this case, his a friend, which would probably be considered the spectator, came to him and talked to him about splitting. He didn't understand what was going on. Now that's kind of the fishiest thing about what Julian has to say, because as a top-end competitor, it's hard to believe that you don't know what this is, that like a situation like this. It's hard to believe that. It's possible, but that is the fishy part of your statement. Now, the judge is saying a wager was made or something that they would consider wagering was done in this conversation. Julian says that wasn't, and he didn't understand. That's where this kind of matches, where the account from that judge says the player didn't understand what they had done was considered wagering. And Julian does recall that there was a specific piece of wording that he should have used to better clarify in this. The penalty, which has been assessed between top 8 and 4 rounds, was appropriately applied to the top 4 and not retroactively applied to the completed top 8 matches. A match loss is functionally different than a disqualification, as the player in question would still receive the prizes earned from reaching top 4 of the event, and the players would take no further action. Fair. Again, this isn't a disqualification. If I put like DQ in my title or thumbnail, I'm just trying to clickbait you. That's all it is, but it's not a DQ. It's a match loss. It is functionally a DQ in the sense that you are out of the tournament because it's single elimination, but not so much so in terms of pricing. The player did wish to speak with Pastimes and did so with another Pastimes employee at the stage while continuing this investigation. With input from investigating staff members, I ultimately decided that while we were fairly certain the inappropriate collusion and bribery ring had impacted the event's integrity, we did not have sufficient evidence to apply a cheating DQ'd to a single player or group of players. So they were aware of different cheating situations happening, but they didn't have enough information to really pin it on certain people or disqualify others. To many reading this, it kind of feels like Julian was put up as an example to others. Like he was brought behind to the firing squad for the whole crowd to watch, in a sense. That's kind of what people are getting, which is kind of like fueling some fires here. Instead, I chose to remind the top 8 players bribery collusion strictly prohibited in a Magic tournament, that I was aware that this had been happening inappropriately in this event and the qualifying events. I reminded the players that I did have the ability to retroactively disqualify a player for cheating, and that if I received hard proof, a screenshot confession, that one of them had participated in this, I would exercise that ability and make sure Wizards saw the report. At this time, there have been no disqualifications from GenCon 2024 in any events across the weekend. I hope this reports provide clarity and respecting the identities of players and staff involved. So it seems like, right? And again, it's hard to know which which side of the situation is correct, right? Because we have to apply the whole innocent until proven guilty type of situation, right? This to me isn't hard proof. This is the other side of the story. This is one person providing an account, and Julian provided another account. I want to be objective on both sides and acknowledge the fact that there are holes in both sides of the situation. So I don't necessarily believe one side or the other hard. Julian and this judge both are people, based on my experience, my limited amount of research and knowledge of the situation, are both individuals that, you know, like, don't have any reason to me to feel like they would want to kind of lie, or in the judge's situation, control the outcome of the situation. To my knowledge, there isn't any reason for either party to do that. And so with that, I think a lot of frustration has come out in the sense that maybe Julian was taken out as an example. This was a series of broken telephone because the judge misheard what was going on. Julian should have clarified more. There's a lot of frustrations around a situation like this. I think that I'm happy the judge provided this statement, but it's also a very unique situation. I think for legal purposes, for both, like, you know, they can't even acknowledge the fact that the card was worth money, that the winning was that. They can't acknowledge that part at all. So the whole situation around, oh, first place is 50, second place is 0, they can't even acknowledge that situation. The winning was the card. The card was the prize. And also around the fact that they usually don't make responses like this, and chances are this has been reviewed by like multiple people before this statement was allowed to go out. I doubt Meg made this statement without, you know, just by, just on a whim. Right? Like, they didn't just make it on a whim without any other person looking at this. So that's probably something to consider here. So before we move any further, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. After this whole kind of read through, what do you think of this situation? So let's go into some kind of final sections here. So Josh says that, remember when WotC used to pay judges with product? This is kind of like that. They can't acknowledge the street value of the card for a number of reasons, including that the value of the card is completely unknown at the time that they're publicizing the event. It's not cash. And that's true too. The judging program was very controversial because it wasn't a series of folks directly employed under Wizards of the Coast. Like, Wizards of the Coast did not want to do that. They didn't have the funds for it. They didn't want to give these employees like benefits and everything like that. They're not employees. They are contracted from Wizards, and so they are prized out or provided quote unquote payment or compensation in different ways through cards, through judge exclusive, judge promos, all that stuff. And so yeah, they can't acknowledge the value of the card being whatever X amount of money. It's not like it's like it's not like it's some card worth like $200 that you can go on TCG Player. This is $48,000 in my opinion. Is just what someone, you know, wanted to pay for it. It's like the One Ring. Post Malone wanted to pay $2 million for it, so that's the value of the One Ring. It could be more based on someone else's wants and needs. It could be more. And so that's kind of the situation around the $50,000 thing. So the judge cast, I think, is very relevant to get their perspective here. Who wants to tell the class why judges and TOs don't talk publicly about things like DQs, bribery, or wagering rules? Reasons have changed a bit over the years, but we don't talk about ongoing investigations as they may change if the player gets suspended. We don't talk because we understand social media stays around forever, and we hope the player can learn and not repeat mistakes. And having a statement from a judge thrown in their face for the rest of their career isn't conducive to players returning as functioning members of their community, right? So now this situation from Meg is going to be, you know, it's going to be out there as a response. But recently, in the last few years, there's another reason: liability. A lot of TOs are one medium-sized lawsuit away from having to close up shop. That's the best way to. And what's the best way to protect yourself? Say nothing. The Pastimes announcement also almost certainly went through a lawyer. So this is specifically not Meg's response that they're referring to, but the Pastime response that we initially saw from, I believe, is a Facebook post. But I imagine Meg's response also got reviewed and probably had significant edits, because all it takes is one item that could be interpreted as debatable fact, and you got a defamation lawsuit. Judges will share stories of investigations, but those are typically a year plus after the fact and sanitized to remove player info and used for teaching instruction. I don't think I've ever seen a public player account of a DQ match loss that I've made or been near match the facts as the judge understands them. It's not necessarily that someone is lying. It's different facts are focused on and go through some distortion. So again, the whole idea that any story has side 1, side 2, and the truth, because things get mixed in between, our brains kind of change facts, and that's objectively true. There are real scientific studies that tell us, like, over time, through memory, our brain changes those facts. They glaze over certain details to make the story smoother. That's why it feels like sometimes when you listen to someone's story, it gets more extraordinary the more and more they tell that story. It's a real scientific fact. So maybe there's not enough time passed for a situation like this, about a week or something, but people have had time to mull over the details, think about that situation. Some of the details are going to be more focused on than others. But it's very important to note that, yes, the lack of substance in the situation or in the statement from the Pastimes group is probably hyper edited down. They cannot acknowledge why they believe Julian was lying. They can call him a liar. They can say this, whatever. They didn't say he was a liar, but they can insinuate it, and they can give their kind of statement on what the actual situation was. And that was probably hyper edited. They can't necessarily explain why, because they can't admit to the fact that honestly, all the information was not detailed here, because Julian has his own side of the story, kind of outlining a slightly different situation that could lead to different outcomes. And so this is where we come back to Julian's story. Do you believe that the judge is in the wrong? Do you believe Julian's at the wrong? Or do you feel like no one's ever going to feel the truth here? I think it's unfortunate that Julian ultimately wasn't given the chance to play out to $48,000 potentially. Obviously, we don't know the price of the card at the time when Julian was playing for it. I don't believe there was any story so far about kind of any predisposition to the price of the card. It was something that someone paid for at the time on site. I would be very happy to take $48,000 on the spot for a tournament I just won. Again, that is life-changing amount of money, especially $48,000 USD. Especially as a Canadian, that's, again, more life-changing money for me. More so, in terms of the conversion rate. But, again, he could have lost in the round after, he could have lost after that. And ultimately, judges are here to keep the competitive integrity of the game. That is what I got from that response from Meg, that, it seems like they were trying to keep the competitive integrity of the game. It seems like that's what's going on from Meg and from the decisions they were making based on the information provided to them. However, it does feel like the information provided to them was on some level a little bit of broken telephone. I think there are some holes in Julian's story. There are some holes in the judge's story, specifically because of the information provided to them. They're working with, limited pieces here, and they did have knowledge of the situation. Maybe there was a better way to enforce or handle the situation. But it's still also kind of wild that someone else from outside can come into a tournament situation, say something to you, and you get a match loss. That's also kind of insane if you really think about it, right? Like, how do you even police that? I think that needs to be a big thing that's addressed. Like, I think Saffron Olive posted a funny tweet about this, where it's kind of insane that, someone can come up to LSV at any tournament, say something wild, right? Like this, like, hey, do you want to split? And LSV gets disqualified. I think this is going to be one of those first time cases, and it's constantly going to get referred back to you, especially if Wizards of the Coast is going to continue to provide these insane pricing supports that aren't monetary in value necessarily. They are physical cards that then the value is left up to the buyer. And I don't know. I don't think there's actually any good solution coming out of this, and that's what really concerns me. There's no definitive update on the rulings of a situation like this, how to enforce the anti-cheating of something like this. And I think ultimately there are ways where splitting can benefit both players. I don't think it should just be splitting is completely wrong. This type of way is completely wrong. I think there's situations like, conceding to your opponent or intentional conceding, like that could be definitely like a bad situation in terms of upholding competitive integrity, but especially at like a local level, like at my LGS, I shouldn't say not at my LGS, at LGSs I've been to previously, I split multiple times at an LGS level, right? 4-round tournament, I don't know, prize is like $30, $40, $50. Like, all right, instead of one person playing for 10, the other one playing for 30, let's mutually just play for 15 or something like that. Or I don't know, like whatever it might be, let's just mutually play for that. And that's perfectly fine because you're at an LGS level. This isn't some super high stakes situation. Y'all just want to play a casual game. And that's it, right? Like, I think that's perfectly fine. At a tournament level, like something like this, I think it's much more of a nuanced discussion. There's more to be talked about here. So I don't know where I ultimately land, but I don't know. It's a weird situation. It's hard to bring this up because ultimately we are playing a card game, but now that a children's card game, but all that's kind of diminishing the situation. because there is a life-changing amount of money on the line. This isn't like, you know, when you see all over the internet, when with the state of everything right now, especially if you're in Canada, the whole Galen Weston situation with groceries and the prices of things, people are always on the internet like, if you see someone stealing that groceries, you didn't see it, you know. And that's kind of where my reaction with the whole snitching thing was coming from. But that's different than this. You know, this is, the whole grocery thing is people's livelihoods, whereas this is, again, a children's card game. But again, I don't want to diminish it. It's just kind of taking that outside perspective of like, should this matter so much? I mean, ultimately, like, Julian didn't pay $50,000 to get into it, so it's not like they were trying to win their money back. So it kind of feels like a situation of gambling where you felt like you could have won $50,000, but maybe you were just down like $50, $100, whatever it was to get in, which is what I would call an acceptable loss. You kind of go into the situation realizing the fact that maybe you will just lose round one. That's something you have to accept. That's what you pay to do. You honestly are paying to lose round one, and then past that is anything bonus. You're kind of paying for the worst case scenario to potentially happen here, because statistically speaking, for all those people that got into the qualifier, went to multiple qualifiers, then went to this final championship, statistically speaking, you're not winning that $50,000. So again, it could be seen as gambling. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point. There's a lot on my mind about this. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I don't know. It's a crazy situation. I wish some type of rules enforcement came out of this.